Whilst running out, Uma stumbled on something on the floor and she fell down. Uma looked down at what she stumbled on and what had caused her to fall, and that was when she realized that it was the body of a dead man. Uma was going to ignore the dead man and continue to run out of the so hot building when she noticed a tiny feet moved beneath the body of the dead man. Uma paused and stared at the direction of where she saw the tiny feet to be sure that her eyes had not tricked her. And for the second time again, Uma saw the tiny feet beneath the dead man moved. Quickly, Uma rolled the body over and there she saw a little baby boy. Uma quickly observed the baby and realized that the baby was still breathing. Uma picked the baby up and rushed out of the building. By this time, the fire service had already arrived and were beginning to put out the fire. There were also about 2 to 3 ambulances carrying wounded victims to the ambulance. One of the emergency rescue health workers who had come with the ambulance saw Uma running out with the little boy in her arms and rushed to take the baby from Uma's arm so they could put him in with the other victims of the accident in the ambulance. But Uma refused to hand over the baby to the health worker. Sister Oluchi, we need to talk about the embarrassment you caused I and Uma today, Izunna said, immediately returned home after dropping Uma off at her house. Oluchi was in the living room and was watching a TV program. She paid Izunna no attention and fixed her gaze on the TV screen. Izunna spoke again. Sister Oluchi, I demand that we talk about the incident that happened earlier today. But still, Oluchi gave him no reply. I will marry Uma no matter what you think, because your opinion no longer matters to me anymore after what you did today, Izunna went ahead to say, trying to pass his message across because he was sure that Uma could hear him even though she did not respond to him. If only you know that my decision against you marrying Uma is for your good and that of this family at large, you won't speak rubbish, was all Oluchi eventually said. Meanwhile, Uma was also in the house reminiscing about the earlier events of the day at Izunna's house. She knew that she had told Izunna that the future of their relationship was not certain. But she had only said so because she was trying to prepare her mind for the worst and prepare Izunna likewise. But thinking about it right now, she knew it would be difficult for her to let Izunna go because she was already so much in love with him. The next day at work, Uma was not her usual cheerful self. She tried to go about her usual duty and force a smile to keep up like other usual days. But few of her colleagues who really knew her could tell that all was not well with her. One of such people was Mrs. Roslyn, and who is commonly known and addressed as Matron Roslyn by everyone in Health and Bliss Hospital. Mrs. Roslyn is a middle-aged woman and amongst the few oldest staff of the hospital, just as Uma. Matron Roslyn and Uma have a good cordial relationship between them, and that was why Uma could not hide the issue bothering her from Matron Roslyn when Matron Roslyn asked her what the issue with her was. Matron Roslyn is also aware of Uma's relationship right from the start, as she had also encouraged Uma to ignore the age difference between her and Izunna and go ahead to date Izunna since she truly loved him. So, it was easy for Uma to relate the incident of the previous day at Izunna's house to Mrs. Roslyn. I won't tell you that it is going to be easy and smooth at the beginning, but You will be glad in the end if you do not quit and give up on the relationship. Some sister-in-law can be very overbearing sometimes, especially when they have worked and made tremendous impacts in the life of their brothers, as in the case of Oluchi. But you have to stick with the man you love while you continue to show his sister respect. And in the end, she would realize that you are a friend and not a fool, Mrs. Roslyn advised Umma. And so, Umma heeded to Mrs. Roslyn's advice and decided not to end a relationship with Izunna. And few months later, they got married despite Oluchi's objections. They got married in a small traditional marriage and a court wedding. Umma and Izunna opted for a small wedding and decided not to do it elaborate because Oluchi did not give her support and did not attend their wedding. I think it is time for you to return to your own home now. Your husband left behind that house for you amongst his other properties. So, it will be wrong for you to abandon everything, Izunna called and told Oluchi one day. Izunna and Umma had been on their honeymoon and had been away for 2 weeks. They were planning to return after the 3rd week. Knowing that Oluchi does not like Umma and would want to always give Umma trouble, Izunna thought that it was wise that they do not stay in the same house, and that was why he made the call, suggesting that Oluchi should return to her matrimonial home. But Oluchi said nothing and instead made a long offensive sigh and dropped the call on Izunna. You must be dreaming to think that I would leave my father's house and the properties I fought to retrieve, all because of your stupid Umma, Oluchi said aloud after dropping the call, but to no one, as she was the only one at home at the time. And so, Izunna and Umma returned home from their honeymoon with Oluchi still around and unwilling to leave. Oluchi did things to make Umma uncomfortable in the house. Sometimes, she would turn off the gas cooker if she sees that Umma is cooking. Umma would return to the kitchen to discover that the gas has been turned off. And later, when Umma would not leave the kitchen until she completes her cooking, Oluchi would add much amount of salt to Umma's already cooked pot of food to ruin the old food immediately Umma leaves the kitchen. Sometimes she would also turn off the main switch that powers the whole house when she senses that Umma is using the washing machine in the house or when Umma is watching a TV program. Now, about 2 years ago one afternoon, Umma was heading to work. She was on night duty on that day, so she had left her home around 3 p.m, the time she usually leaves her home for work whenever she was on night duty. Umma wanted to get a gift for Mrs. Roslyn before going to work because that day was also Mrs. Roslyn's birthday. So, she decided to stop by a mall where she intends to buy the gifts. The route to the mall was a different one from the one Umma usually takes to work, but it still led to her workplace. Umma got to the location of the mall, but to her shock and what was a sad event that most people still remembered, the mall was on fire. There were many people running helter-skelter at the scene, and some people were trying to put off the fire with buckets of water before the fire service could get to the scene. Whilst a few others, who were brave enough, were running into the burning building and trying to rescue those who were trapped in the building. Though Umma was shocked and confused when she got to the scene, the will she had in her to always help in situations of need made her also run closer to the burning building to see if she could also help in any way. But the heat coming from the building was so intense that Umma could not go further and she ran out immediately. Then, whilst running out, Uma stumbled on something on the floor and she fell down. Uma looked down at what she stumbled on and what had caused her to fall, and that was when she realized that it was the body of a dead man. Uma was going to ignore the dead man and continue to run out of the so-hot building when she noticed a tiny feet moved beneath the body of the dead man. Uma paused and stared at the direction of where she saw the tiny feet to be sure that her eyes had not tricked her. And for the second time again, Uma saw the tiny feet beneath the dead man moved. Quickly, Uma rolled the body over and there she saw a little baby boy. Uma quickly observed the baby and realized that the baby was still breathing. Uma picked the baby up and rushed out of the building. By this time, the fire service had already arrived and were beginning to put out the fire. There were also about 2 to 3 ambulances carrying wounded victims to the ambulance. One of the emergency rescue health workers who had come with the ambulance saw Uma running out with the little boy in her arms and rushed to take the baby from Uma's arm so they could put him in with the other victims of the accident in the ambulance. But Uma refused to hand over the baby to the health worker. I am a certified nurse. I have a degree in general nursing and another degree in pediatric and child health care, Uma explained as she quickly searched for her identity card in her bag, of which a part had already got burnt due to the heat of the fire, and showed it to the health worker. I would join the ambulance, but this baby would be with me as I want to be the one to personally watch over this child and administer the first aid to him before we get to the hospital. I can't afford to let him go or for anything to happen to him, Uma said. And so, just as she said, Uma applied her knowledge on child health care and ensured that the baby stayed alive till they got to the hospital. The baby survived. The morning of the next day, the government announced on TV that amongst the few survivors of the fire accidents, there were also about 3 young children, and that those whose family and loved ones were victims of the fire accident at the mall should go to the general hospital to identify if the survivors were a member of their family. That afternoon, an elderly man and his wife, who were both about 65 to 70 years in age, appeared at the general hospital crying and claimed that the young baby Uma had found and saved was their grandson, and that the baby's parents, who were with the baby at the mall, did not survive the fire accident. The government officials in charge of the case asked the elderly couple to provide documents to prove their claim. And later that evening, the elderly couple returned with a birth certificate for the child and pictures that showed the little boy with his parents at different stages from his birth up to his current age. In some of the pictures, the elderly couple were also seen with the baby and his parents. The officials were convinced, and so they handed over the baby to the elderly couple. Uma, who visited the general hospital to check on the baby later that evening, was worried that the officials just gave out the baby to the elderly couple without running a background check on them. The officials defended their error with the fact that the elderly couple had dropped their contact and address, which they confirmed to be real. Uma requested for the couple's address and paid them a visit to confirm if they were real and if the baby was safe. When she got to their house, she became a little relaxed that she now knows the house of the elderly couple, but she still felt a little uneasy within her. From time to time, Uma paid the baby a visit. Then, just 4 months from the time the couple retrieved the baby, Uma found out that the couple relocated to another city with the baby without telling anyone. Worried about this, Uma paid a private detective to help her keep tabs on the elderly couple in the new city they moved to. And it was then that Uma discovered that the elderly couple were making plans to sell off the baby to some people in Abuja city. This was 3 months after they had moved to their new location. Uma alerted the authorities and the elderly couple were arrested while the baby was retrieved and kept in the orphanage home. Uma decided that she wanted to adopt the baby, but the authorities would not release the baby to her because she was unmarried. According to the authorities, even if they would have loved to allow her adopt the baby, they could not because of the nature of her job, which keeps her away from the house most of the time. If you were married, at least we would believe that your spouse would be around to look after the baby while you are at work. But seeing that you are single, we cannot risk handing over the baby to you, the authorities explained. We know that your intentions for the baby are good, but the circumstances does not permit us to let you have the child. We apologize, Miss Eze, they said, apologizing to Uma. And so, the baby had been in the orphanage since then, with Uma checking up on him from time to time. Now that she is married, Uma is happy and saw it as a perfect time to try again for the adoption of the baby. She discussed it with Izunna and he gave his approval. While they were dating, Uma had already told Izunna the story about the baby. Izunna was emotional when Uma first told him the story of the baby, as it was the same incident that claimed the life of his brother-in-law, Oluchi's husband, and his nephew, Oluchi's son. Oluchi lost her husband and son in that incident also, he told Uma. On few occasions that Uma went to visit the baby when she and Izunna were still dating. She had asked Izunna to accompany her, but something always comes up and Izunna never got to visit the baby with Uma. It would be so nice to give that baby a decent home, so I am okay for us to adopt the child, Izunna replied when Uma came up with the idea of adopting the baby because they are now married. However, Oluchi, who was coming out of her room and had walked into the balcony where Uma and Izunna were having the discussion, overheard them. "Oh wow! So you want to use trick on my brother, right? You want to use a cunning way to bring in your bastard child you had somewhere and later abandoned in the orphanage in the disguise of adopting an helpless child," Oluchi said. Uma tried to defend herself and stated that the child was really a helpless child she had grown fond of and was only trying to help, and that she had never had her own biological child before. But Oluchi kept insinuating and insisting that the child Uma was trying to adopt is Uma's child and that Uma is trying to use trick and make her brother Izunna accept her illegitimate child. "No bastard child will ever enter this house. I will make sure of it," Oluchi swore before Uma and Izunna. And so, the next day when Uma and Izunna were away at work, Oluchi planted secret cameras in specific areas in the house to keep tabs on Uma and Izunna's discussion. One in their bedroom, another in the living room, and also in the kitchen. With these secret cameras, Oluchi was able to know anytime Izunna and Uma planned on going to the orphanage to commence the adoption process. Twice, she added laxative to Izunna's drink and meal, which caused him to stool uncontrollably on those days he and Uma were supposed to go start the adoption process. However, Oluchi did not succeed the fourth time she tried, as Izunna did not take anything at all before leaving the house for work that morning. Izunna was dumbfounded and was full with emotions when he eventually got to the orphanage and discovered that the baby Uma had saved had been talking to him about all this while and wanted them to adopt is actually his own nephew, Oluchi's son, whom they had thought died in the fire accident. Though it had been 2 years, Izunna could recognize the child. He felt a rush of emotions and did not know when tears started flowing from his eyes as he held the little boy in his arms. When Izunna was calm, he called Oluchi, asking her to come over to the orphanage because it was important and had to do with her son. Oluchi was reluctant at first and confused by Izunna's words when she received his call, but she went to the orphanage still. Just as Izunna, Oluchi was also able to recognize her son immediately she saw him and held him in her arms. Uma narrated to Oluchi in detail how she found and saved the child and the drama with the elderly couple who had claimed the baby and wanted to sell him. Izunna and Oluchi went to the prison to see and know who the elderly couple who had attempted to sell Oluchi's baby were, and were shocked to discover that it was their wicked uncle and his wife, the one who had stolen the properties their late parents left behind before they recovered it back. What had happened was that Oluchi had fainted when the news of the burnt building reached her. Izunna and members of Oluchi's husband's family had rushed to the scene of the incident and discovered bodies that were burnt beyond recognition. This was after the fire service had put off the fire. They also checked the hospital where the few survivors were taken to, and Oluchi's husband was not amongst them. So, they concluded that Oluchi's husband and son were amongst the bodies that were burnt beyond recognition. They were so in grief and had not turned on their television nor listened to the news the next morning, and so did not hear that 3 other babies had survived and were in a different hospital. But their wicked uncle and his wife watched the news. They sought to use that as an opportunity to take revenge on Oluchi, so they went to claim the baby as their grandchild. They produced a fake birth certificate of the child and retrieved photos of Oluchi, her husband, and the child from Oluchi's social media page, which they presented as evidences. They gave an expert to Photoshop their images in some of the pictures to make the officials believe their lies. Izunna and Oluchi could not believe that their uncle and his wife were that evil to the extent of even hurting Oluchi's little baby, who was pure and innocent. Oluchi was full of emotions as she was grateful to have her child back again. From what Uma had described, it revealed that Oluchi's husband had cuddled up his child beneath him and protected him from the fire. It was evident that he died protecting his child. This time around, the officials decided to be extra careful, so they conducted a DNA test to ascertain Oluchi's maternity claim, and the result proved Oluchi to be the child's mother indeed. Oluchi was allowed to go home with her child. That night, Oluchi lay on her bed thinking of the incident of the past 3 days and 2 years before. She realized that the woman she had fought against marrying her brother ended up being a blessing and an angel who had saved her child and helped her reunite with her child. What if Uma had not saved my baby on that day? What even after that? She had not been vigilant and my uncle and his wife had succeeded in selling my baby to some stranger. What if she had not loved my child enough to want to adopt him as her own? How would I have discovered that my child survived and reconnected with him again? This were the questions that flooded Oluchi's mind. She felt bad, also recalling how she behaved badly towards Uma. The next morning, Oluchi was at Izunna and Uma's room door to beg for Uma's forgiveness. Though Uma was hurt, thinking about how Oluchi made life difficult for her, but she released forgiveness to Oluchi, knowing that there is peace and it is strength to let go and release forgiveness to those who have offended us. They lived happily ever after as one big family. I hope you enjoyed the story and that you have learned something from it. I would love to know. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video. Bye.